Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a premise that, well, honestly, it sounds completely bizarre at first, but it's actually deeply rooted in evolutionary biology. We're exploring a fascinating alternate reality. What if humans laid eggs? It's a wild thought experiment for sure, but by looking at the hard science of an oviparous or egg-laying human species, we're going to discover some truly mind-blowing things about our own real-world anatomy, biology, and even our society. To get us started, I want you to picture a modern bedroom. But instead of a pregnant mother tossing and turning in exhaustion carrying a heavy belly, the room is completely quiet. Right next to the bed sits a sleek, glowing, high-tech ceramic basin. Inside that basin, kept at a perfectly warm 37.5 degrees Celsius, rests a cream-colored leathery egg, about the size of an avocado. The mother's abdomen is completely flat. She's experiencing absolutely zero physical strain. What if the human story didn't begin in a fleshy, expanding womb, but inside a quiet, self-contained shell?
Just think about the sheer contrast here. On one side, we have our reality, the delivery room. Bringing a child into the world exacts a massive toll of physical strain, pain, and what biologists call an evolutionary compromise. But on the other side, we have the nesting basin of our alternate reality. A woman just lays a flexible, avocado-sized egg and can literally return to normal physical activity within hours. It's a sleek, almost frictionless alternative to the dangerous childbirth that we know.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, the Great Evolutionary Fork, the alternate path. So, looking back through deep time, about 310 million years ago, we had the Synapsida lineage. As the branches of the tree of life split, our ancestors took the Theria path, and that led to placental mammals, the ones that give birth to live young. But there was another branch, the Monotremata. This led to egg-laying mammals, like the platypus and the echidna. Now in our world, placental mammals took over. But what if the dial of time was tweaked just a bit, and the egg-laying monotremes became the dominant lineage that eventually evolved into highly intelligent, upright primates? The truly crazy thing is, we actually still carry the genetic ghosts of our egg-laying ancestors right now. We possess 3 genes known as the vitellogenin genes, VIT1, VIT2, and VIT3. In modern humans, these are essentially broken genetic fossils. We just don't need them because we don't build egg yolks. But in our oviparous humans, these genes would be fully active. They'd be totally central to their metabolic biology, kicking into gear to build a massive, nutrient-dense yolk.
Which brings us to Section 2, Anatomy of the Egg, the ovicycle.
Let's walk through the 28-day ovicycle, which basically replaces the standard menstrual cycle. In the first phase, a woman's liver literally swells. It increases its metabolic rate by 35% just to synthesize all the proteins and lipids needed for that yolk. Then in phase 2, this massive yolk travels down a highly specialized muscular oviduct, where the albumin, the egg white, is added as a protective cushion. Finally, it enters the shell gland. But it doesn't make a hard, brittle shell like a bird's. No, it pumps out calcium and proteins to create a leathery, parchment-like shell that's super flexible and resilient.
Now, you might be thinking this is easy, but laying an egg isn't a completely free pass. As evolutionary biologist Dr. Evelyn Vance points out, constructing that shell comes at an immense metabolic cost. A woman's body must mobilize up to 20% of her total skeletal calcium over this 2-week building phase. If her diet wasn't incredibly rich in calcium and healthy fats, her bones would literally temporarily demineralize, leading to acute fatigue. So it's a massive, rapid biological sacrifice.
Moving on to Section 3, Redesigning the Human Skeleton, the biomechanical shift.
So, the crucial point here is how egg-laying completely solves what biologists call the obstetrical dilemma. Basically, to walk on 2 legs efficiently, you need a narrow pelvis. But to give birth to a big-brained baby, you need a wide one. Placental humans are stuck in this painful compromise. But looking at Dr. Marcus Thorne's data, for oviparous humans, the pelvic inlet is narrow and identical in both sexes. Why? Because an avocado-sized egg is small. The pubic symphysis can just be a permanently fused, rigid joint. Female athletes in this world would be biologically built for incredibly efficient, high-velocity running, completely matching males' structural efficiency since they bypass that wide pelvis requirement entirely.
And this brilliance leaves us with a fun, truly surprising anatomical quirk. No belly buttons. Every single citizen of this alternate world would have a completely smooth, unbroken abdominal wall. Think about it. The belly button is really just a scar left behind by the umbilical cord connecting us to a placenta. Since an oviparous embryo gets all its nourishment from the yolk inside the egg, there's no umbilical cord, no navel, and absolutely zero risk of pregnancy-induced abdominal muscle separation. I mean, how wild is that?
Let's look at Section 4, the physics of the egg, structural limits.
Now, I know a lot of people immediately picture a giant beach ball-sized egg to accommodate a standard 7-pound newborn baby. But we have to ask, is a giant human egg even scientifically possible?
Well, the short answer is absolutely not. And the reason comes down to a scientific principle called Fick's law of diffusion. Remember, a baby inside an egg can't breathe with its lungs. Oxygen has to passively diffuse through microscopic pores in the shell and into the embryo's bloodstream. Fick's law dictates that as an egg gets bigger, its volume grows much, much faster than its surface area, cubically versus quadratically. So if you had a giant egg, the surface area of the shell would be way too small to pull in enough oxygen to support a massive, oxygen-hungry human brain. The fetus would simply suffocate. Because of this absolute physical limit, evolution dictates that the egg absolutely must remain small. The maximum viable mass of a human egg would be just 180 grams, again, roughly the size of an avocado. But this means that when the human egg is laid and eventually hatches, the embryo inside is not a fully formed infant, not even close. It's incredibly underdeveloped, resembling something closer to a translucent, 5-week-old embryo in our reality.
Which takes us to Section 5, Life in the Pouch, the hatchling phase.
So let's look at the fascinating journey of this tiny hatchling. First, the embryo uses a temporary calcified bump on its nose, an egg tooth, to tear open that leathery shell. It emerges completely blind and totally helpless. Using incredibly strong little forelimbs, it instinctively crawls through the hair on its mother's abdomen and climbs into an incubatorium, or a brood pouch. And here is where it gets really strange. Monotremes don't have nipples. A hatchling that tiny doesn't have the facial muscles to suckle anyway. Instead, the mother has milk patches. These are specialized sweat glands that literally sweat out highly concentrated antibacterial milk directly onto the skin. The hatchling just laps it up while it develops safely in that warm pouch for 9 months.
Now let's zoom out. In Section 6, Societal Ripples, Cultural Shifts. Consider for a moment how an avocado-sized egg entirely rewires human civilization. Once the egg is laid, the female body is no longer a biological life support system. Incubation instantly becomes a shared, democratic duty between partners. You'd likely see couples walking around wearing heated chest harnesses to carry the egg. Automated incubators would have been invented thousands of years ago, completely eliminating the physical career disruptions and medical leaves associated with pregnancy. The physical burden is totally equalized, vastly altering the entire trajectory of gender equality throughout history. Plus, imagine the legal landscape. Debates around personhood would shift entirely, giving rise to armored baby carriages and multi-billion-dollar egg insurance industries. But it's not all perfect. Dr. Vance notes a profound psychological cost, which she calls the paradox of the detached baby. You see, in our world, the placenta creates a deep neurological feedback loop. Mother and baby share a heartbeat and a hormonal state. But in an oviparous world, the egg is a detached, self-contained biological island. The baby doesn't feel the mother's daily emotions or hear her heartbeat from the inside. Society would likely have to invent intense cultural rituals, like continuous skin-to-skin contact or maybe shell singing, just to actively forge the psychological bonds that our placental biology simply gives us for free.
And that brings us to Section 7, the placental trade-off, the price of connection.
Evolution is ultimately a story of trade-offs. An egg-laying humanity would be physically faster, their skeletons more perfectly optimized, their genders infinitely more equalized, and their bodies completely unscarred by dangerous births. But look at what we gained in exchange. We traded that physical perfection for a deep, internal connection. The placental path we took is dangerous, painful, and structurally messy, but it gave us an unmatched intimacy. It bounds our generations together in a shared bloodline, a continuous physical connection long before our first breath. The egg-laying species might look at our messy, dangerous placental reality and wonder what it felt like to carry the future of our species inside our very bones. Was the heavy toll of the womb worth it? What do you think? That's a wrap for today's Explainer. I hope this deep dive helped illuminate just how incredible our biology truly is. Until next time, keep questioning the world around you.
Please like and subscribe.